My name is Vince Sweeney, and I'm Vice Chancellor for University Relations, and I want to introduce to you Micheal Schill, Dean of the Law School at the University of Chicago. Dean Schill will open with a general introductory statement, and he'd be pleased to answer your questions at that time. If you could identify yourself and your media affiliation with the first question, that would help him. So, Micheal?
Okay, so well, thank you all for coming. I think that I've spoken with some of you already, so I don't want to go through in detail some of the things I've already talked to you about, but I'm very honored and actually humbled to be and considered for the position of Chancellor here. This is an amazing university, and its values are values that resonate deeply with me. I'll just mention briefly a little bit about my background and how I think it relates to the university, and why I think why this position is so attractive to me, and then we can continue a conversation. So, as many of you know, my sister and I were first generation college. I got a terrific, really transformative liberal education at Princeton University, and I went to Princeton primarily because I got a huge amount of scholarships. I would have gone to SUNY Albany otherwise. And so one of the things that I value tremendously, and one of the things that the University of Wisconsin stands for, is an accessible, affordable education. And I think that is tremendously important. I think that our nation, if our nation is to succeed, if we are to maintain and really get back our competitive edge, where that's going to happen is in the state universities, the great state universities, because they, including Wisconsin, train a large number of our students, majority of our students who are getting college education. So it's very important that we invest in them, very important that there's great leadership. Now, what attracts me to the University of Wisconsin are a number of things, including both that mission, that public mission of access, which I was part of at the University of California, Los Angeles. And one of the things I loved the most about the University of California was how we gave opportunity to students. Students from very modest backgrounds were transformed by great education and went on to be leaders in Los Angeles, went on to be judges, went on to be legislators, great business leaders. That wouldn't have happened without an affordable, accessible education. And that's something that we need to promote, we need to keep, we need to preserve, we need to cherish that as we move forward, as we think about our public institutions. I also think one of the things that is noteworthy and really very special about this university is the Wisconsin idea. And I know that everybody who will take this seat will start talking about the Wisconsin idea and what the Wisconsin idea means to them. For me, this is really what my whole academic life was about. When I was, my area of expertise, my area of specialty is low-income housing. I have worked with community groups, I have worked with government, I started a research center at NYU called the Furman Center, and what we did is we became what our former dean called the honest broker among government, academics, advocates, and policymakers in the city of New York around the most controversial issue and the most important issue, which is housing. And I love that, and our research I love doing, and I love being a part of informing the public, engaging the public, and hopefully moving the dial and making people's lives better in New York. And so that was a very, very attractive element. I'll just say two more things and then I'll leave it open. Another public value that I think is tremendously important and it's a value that isn't just in public universities, but is a value that is bedrock at the University of Wisconsin, is the value of diversity. It's the value that what we want to do is we want to educate people from all walks of life, and when I say diversity, this is something that I think we don't focus on enough. Diversity means the usual things like race, ethnicity, sexual preference, gender, all of those sort of things. But what it also means is ideological diversity. One of the things that are one of the reasons for diversity is that we want to enhance individuals and create opportunity for people. The other reason we do diversity, the other reason we care about diversity is we believe that we learn from each other. And that to me is what we do at a great university. We put together people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and we learn from each other. And one of the ways we learn from each other is by bringing together people who have different views. Sometimes it's based on where they came from. Sometimes it's their politics. And I think if there is a future, if there's a hope for our polity in a very divisive time, it's going to be found in universities. Because we as a nation need to learn how to talk to each other civilly. We as a nation need to learn how to engage with each other civilly. And that training should happen at a great university, like the University of Wisconsin. So I think that for all those reasons, I think it's just an absolute thrill to be part of this enormously wonderful, great research university, this economic powerhouse for the state of Wisconsin, and it's a place that delivers the most wonderful education for tens of thousands of students each year. So with that, happy to take questions or comments or whatever.
Speaking of conversations, I'm wondering if you had a chance to talk with Chancellor Ward and what questions you asked him about the job.
So we did talk, and we talked a little. We spent a significant time, and I probably shouldn't, talk about it specifically because I don't think he thought that this conversation was going to be relayed to you. But we had a great talk. I told him that I felt that the university was in wonderful shape. That he had led it to a point where the next chancellor is going to be able to really take off running. And I think that's very important. This university, as all of you know, went through a pretty tumultuous time, and it's now cooled off. And my impression is, from everybody I've spoken to, we're ready to start moving. We're ready to have energy, and we're ready to get back to work and make this the greatest university in the country. Now, we also talked about a few other things, including the new flexibilities and what those might provide for the campus and some other issues. But it was a very useful conversation. He was extremely generous, and I think that all of us owe him a great debt. He didn't need to take this job, right? He did it out of love for this institution, and as far as I can tell, did a remarkable job. Yes.
So I'm Taylor from the Daily Cardinal. You had spoken to one of the writers of the Daily Cardinal a few weeks ago when your name was announced, and you mentioned how you had come up to campus a few weeks ago and kind of hung out with unions and trying to get a real feel, in secret, if you will. What were your overall impressions of the UW Medicine, and did you have anything particular that you noticed?
So here's what I noticed. So I came, as you said, and I walked around and was very much hoping that no one would arrest me for loitering. And I spoke with some students. I interrupted. They were looking at their netbooks and their laptops, and we would talk. And what I found was that they were just thrilled with their education here. That they were very excited. They were very happy with the school. Just I was trying to find out, well, what are the big issues, and I didn't hear any major sources of unhappiness from them. Instead, I just heard wonderful things about the school, which is consistent with my experience when I talk to people who graduated from here. I hear that they had great education here, they had great experiences, and then I went on a walking tour, and it was actually quite cold that day, but I got to see a lot of the buildings and learn more from our tour guides. this is a very, very large school. And what I was probing a little bit was the type of education that the students got. Did they get enough attention from professors? Were they able to get the sort of help that they wanted, the sort of mentorship that they wanted? And everyone who I spoke with said yes, that the professors were very accessible, that their classes were not enormous, that they were able to go to professors' offices during office hours time and get tons of assistance. And so that to me was reassuring, a bit surprising given how big the school is, and you know, very exciting for me, because what I've gone to it. I've been dean of 2 institutions, one a grade public, one a grade private. I've been a faculty member at 2 other great institutions. One thing I understand about educational institutions, it is very hard to fix something when the culture is broken. And one thing I can say about Wisconsin is it's got a great culture. And it's got a lot of people who really love being here and love the institution. So when you start with that, if you will, that endowment, it's not a monetary endowment, but it's an endowment of goodwill and happiness, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can achieve. Yes?
Or WKRW 27 so if you did become chancellor, what would you do to make sure that not only does the UW stay competitive in the world, but also stays affordable to students? We've been hearing in Washington a lot about job growth and various politicians praising, 2-year schools and smaller colleges that are getting people into the workforce. What would you do to make sure that UW stays competitive in the students' minds and also gets them into the private sector?
So I think, what is a great university? A great university is all about human capital. It's all about great people doing path-breaking research, teaching amazing students. So it's bringing together amazing students, great researchers, great teachers. Hopefully the teachers, the great research and the great teachers are one and the same in many instances. And what I think is very important for the future of the University of Wisconsin is to make sure that the university is competitive with respect to the attraction of both students and of faculty. And there's different things that one would do for both. Money is part of the issue with both. So I think if we start, one of the things that is very clear about the University of Wisconsin is that salaries have lagged for professors. And it's a problem. I know this. I've been a dean at 2 different schools. I know how competitive the market is. And so what one needs to do is one needs to keep the great professors that are here. One needs to attract other professors who are equally great or even better to the school. And you can do that. Love will do that to a certain extent. But at a certain extent, love alone won't be enough. And what you need to do is you need to offer them competitive packages. And I mean competitive packages by way of both salary, but also, for scientists, they need labs, they need equipment, they need the ability to achieve what they want to achieve in terms of resources, research and the like. So I think part of what needs to be done is to attract and retain faculty. Now, there's lots of different ways that one can do that. There's lots of different revenue sources. And there's not going to be a silver bullet. One is to maintain or perhaps try to grow state contribution, which has recently come down. Indeed, yesterday, I believe there was an article in the paper for the first time. State contributions in public universities are now the minority of the funding. So we need to fight for more state funding. And the way to do that is to be accountable. The way to do that is to tell people about the great things that are going on here, but also to listen to people around the state and hear what they want from the university, hear what their expectations are for the university, because we're a partnership. And what we need to do is we need to deliver on what the state needs. We need to develop relationships with the legislators. We need to develop relationships with the governors, and we need to cooperate with the system. This is a great system, the University of Wisconsin. There are ways in which this university can cooperate through articulation agreements, through transfer agreements, through sharing of resources, that we've only touched the beginning of the iceberg with respect to that. So one element is making the case for funding and then being held accountable for that funding. The second element is to fight for every last dollar of federal science funding, medical funding, which is going to be increasingly difficult over the future. We now have sequestration, which is, that's a short-term problem, we hope, but then over the long haul, we would expect there to be budget cuts. So the University of Wisconsin is a powerhouse in research. We get much more than the share. Wisconsin gets much more than their proportionate share of science funding. And what we need to do is get more of that and really fight hard to justify getting lots of research money into the university. So that's important. Thirdly, philanthropy. One of the things that great public universities have sometimes been slow to recognize is they need to play a private game. And what they need to do is raise money from alumni. And I have to say, we start at Wisconsin with a tremendous advantage, because what we have at Wisconsin is alumni who love the school and who are happy with the school, who value the school. And that's tremendous, because you can just tap right into that love and get them engaged, get them passionate about the school, come up with big ideas that will get them wanting to contribute, wanting to dig deep. So first is to articulate to them that the state is no longer paying for all of the expenses at Wisconsin. The state is not even paying for the majority of expenses at Wisconsin. So private philanthropy is important. And as I may have mentioned, I started 2 campaigns, both of which were campaigns that had several 7-figure and 8-figure gifts. And I think that it would be very important for us to start a campaign probably in the next 2 years and engage alumni in providing resources to the university to allow it to continue what it's doing. Lastly, and well, 2 more things, and then I'll subside and let other people ask questions. And that is, there are tech transfer. This university, as I said a moment ago, tremendously impressive university with respect to science, with respect to innovation, and Wharf, amazing. And there's so much here at Wardridge Center, the Center for Discovery, Wharf, the University Park. So the pieces are all here. And we need to focus on what we can do to monetize some of that and develop additional resources for the university. And the last element of the package would be to really make efforts to develop other monetizable sources of revenue, whether that's through online technologies, whether that's through other types of innovation. But all of those things will contribute to providing a firmer financial position and allow us at the University of Wisconsin to minimize whatever tuition increases there will be. I mean, I'm not going to, and I would never insult your intelligence by saying, and you and I had this conversation a couple moments ago, I would never insult your intelligence by saying there will never be tuition increases here. That would be, anyone who says that you should not believe. But what you should believe is, if I were to become chancellor, I would try to minimize those increases by increasing revenue in all of these other places. Yeah.
So I guess also in your interview with the Daily Cardinal, you mentioned how your job as Dean of Law at the University of Chicago would be rather similar to the job as Chancellor here. But what differences do you see? What differences do you see in the job here, and what challenges do you think you're going to face?
UCLA than it is to Chicago. And what the dean does is, the dean does many of the things that a chancellor does. We hire people, we let people go, we motivate people, we fundraise, we manage budgets, we strategically plan, we work with faculty, we engage with external communities. So all of those things are, and we engage with our faculties and other entities. So shared governance at a school like UCLA is very similar to shared governance at a place like Wisconsin. So we do take into account what all these constituents want. Now, how is it different from Wisconsin? I think shared governance, so how is a dean's job different from a chancellor's job? Obviously, all of these things are at a greater scale than with the dean's position. For example, I do a budget. I create budget. I manage a group of people. There's just many more people to manage at a place like this. There's a budget that is bigger. There is a role of working at a place like Wisconsin with the system president as well as with the board of regents. And that is another element of the job that is different from what a dean does. A dean is normally insulated from operating with those groups. Now, in reality, what ended up happening at UCLA was we did operate with the board of regents, with the state board of regents, and with the office of the president in Oakland. And we did that because we also were having a funding problem, and the chancellor agreed that we could do that. So, in many ways, there's great similarity between all of those different functions. I think in the end, it is all about relationships. It's all about being transparent. It's all about engendering trust. It's all about, most importantly, having ideas and having the ability to excite people and the ability to get people to want to come together around a vision of a school. And that's what a dean does, that's what a good dean does, and that's what a chancellor does.
One obvious difference is athletics. You've probably heard they have a program here. Just curious if you've looked into that relationship and it's something that excites you, or if you have thoughts about dealing with athletics on this scale.
Sure. So I didn't manage athletics, obviously, when I was at UCLA, but I did go to lots of Bruins games and did some of my best external relations work at Bruins games, and had a whole different color outfit when I was there. I think that athletics is incredibly important to a university, particularly the University of Wisconsin. I think it's important at two levels. One level is the individual. I think that the students who participate in athletics are learning things that are priceless. They're learning teamwork, they're learning persistence, they're learning how to deal with defeat, they're getting character building lessons every day, they're getting physical benefits of the exercise, and they're learning about the advantages of diversity, because typically athletic teams are going to be more diverse than are going to be the everyday experience of many students. So for all those reasons, I think that athletics are incredible benefits, create incredible leadership benefits for the students that engage them. They also generate incredible benefits for the university, group benefits. Those benefits create a huge connection between the university and the people of the state who sort of own the university and think about the team as their own team. They create benefits for alumni. They bring the alumni back to school. They create connections. They create camaraderie. They create excitement. They create school spirit. So all of those things are benefits. I do think that athletics do have the possible negative side, and I think we all know about that. Some schools have gotten into trouble recently. We should be taking seriously the two words, scholar, athlete. What word comes first? Scholar. We're an educational institution. This is a school about educating people. This is a school that wants to enroll and train people and not just use them as people who are playing a sport. And I think that's very important. I think that Wisconsin does a very good job of that from everything I understand. It has minor violations of NCAA rules, but so does every school. But I believe the values are right. So I think what we need to do, what a school like Wisconsin needs to do, is make sure the values, the appropriate values, are articulated by the chancellor. The values are sports are important, athletics are important, the Badgers are incredibly important to us. But going to class is important. But graduating is important. Going out and being able to get a job other than sports is also very important. And what you need to do is articulate those messages from the top, hire the right people to implement those, and enforce and hold people accountable. And I think with all of those things in place, you can have a very successful athletic program. And it doesn't happen magically. And I do think that for most of the Big Ten, it's quite successful in that sense. But it is something that one has to remain vigilant about. Yes.
So I guess in terms of you're talking about building relationships and exciting people, how do you plan to make yourself accessible to the student body here? I know, for example, former Chancellor Biddy Martin, she used to have a Twitter feed. She'd have Q&A on Twitter, which proved quite successful. So I guess what is your plan there?
So Twitter, I have to say, most of what's on Twitter is so inane that I don't get excited about it. But I might consider it if I can think of, I don't think people are interested that, if I walked down the street and I saw a bird, which is sort of what you see on Twitter half the time. I think what I really want is meaningful interaction with students. And I'm not saying that's what Biddy did, but to Twitter about that. But what I'm saying is what is authentic to me. And I think what every chancellor, every person will have something will have to act in a way that's authentic to them. And what's authentic to me is to develop a relationship. And that's not going to be necessarily online. So what I do now is I have office hours. I invite students into the office hours. Sometimes it's someone who comes in and complains about something. Most often it's just someone who wants to come in and meet me and talk to me about something. And that's wonderful. I have town halls. I show up at every student event I can show up at, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's a cultural event, whether it's something we call coffee mess on every Wednesday morning. But it's being available to the students, taking the students' concerns seriously. I use email. I have very good email hygiene. I try to answer all of my emails every day. And if a student emails me, they know they get an answer by midnight. And if they don't get an answer, they usually get an answer within 10 minutes because I carry them around on my cell phone. So I think that you want to be accessible. You want every student to feel empowered and that you care about them. And I think, and you also, if possible, want to teach. Teaching is the most important thing we do at a university. So when the chancellor teaches, the chancellor is showing by example what is important. And I know that I usually teach every year. This year I taught a class in the college, so I taught undergraduates, and although I'm a law school professor. And it was a remarkable experience. It was actually the first time I taught college students. So smart, so interested, really diverse. I had a great time. So it's almost as much fun for me as I hope it was for them. And I think that in all of those ways, one can understand both what's on students' minds and then engage with students. Now here, as chancellor, there is a whole other side of student engagement with respect to shared governance. and I look forward to that if I were ultimately to be chosen as chancellor, is going to the student meetings, BSM and other types of organizations, and engaging with the students, because the students at Wisconsin are unusually empowered, and that's part of the culture of the place. And I think that would be an important role for the chancellor. So any number of ways. There isn't just one way of engagement.
Time for one more question.
You always raise the cost. The quality is so high, people think of that last question. Go ahead.
So I guess in terms of shared governance, obviously you've probably talked to Slack today, talked to Whisper representatives and ASM. It's something that University of Wisconsin students hold very dear here. So I guess, how do you plan to really reinforce shared governance or enhance it?
So I think shared governance is great. Because the one thing about me that I hope people understand is I don't, maybe this will burst your balloon. I don't have all the answers. I'm not always right, okay? I'm not infallible. And I learn from other people. And one of the things I think most people will say about me, who have worked with me as dean over the past 9 years, is that I love a good pushback. So I like it when people tell me I'm wrong, and as long as they do that nicely, and I will do it nicely back to them. And you get to a better result by having really good, robust conversations where you get to really explore all the pros and cons around something. I'm not reticent to make a decision. In fact, I very much like to make a decision, and with that decision I want to implement it. But there is a time for exploring various opinions. And I think that's what shared governance is about. What shared governance is consultation. What shared governance is enlisting other people. And if you treat them with respect, and if you take seriously their views, you not only end up with a better decision, but you end up with buy-in, which makes it so much easier to implement the decision. So you're able, for example, the people who ultimately are part of shared governance become the foot soldiers for whatever you're trying to do. And they convince other people. And they don't have to win everything, right? No one wins everything. You convince people, and they convince you, and you end up with something that is a good policy or good curricular change or whatever it is, and then you move forward. And I think that's very important. So I think that in terms of how I would approach shared governance is to embrace it as part of what makes this school such a remarkable place, such an unusual place. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.